Hi, my name is Shaul, and I'm really not used to speaking in English, so I apologize from the beginning. It's all Mushon's fault. I'm 34, almost 35 years old, which is very old, basically. And I work in Calcalist since it was founded back in 2008. Prior to that, I worked at the Ministry of Finance for a year or so, doing very, very boring work, filling Excel sheets with numbers that I didn't know what they meant, stuff like that. And then by chance, I got into journalism, and every day that goes by, I realize again what an amazing profession it is. I get to do different things every day. I get to learn different stuff about the society we live in every day, which is very exciting and fun. And what I want to talk about today is how we in Calcalist and also in the other newspapers that we're competing with use data in order to change the society that we live in, to influence the way decisions are being made about their outcomes. So Calcalist was founded in 2008, right before the global economic crisis broke down, which is very, very bad timing to open a new business, but we didn't know. We didn't know that then that this is what we're doing. Right from the very beginning, our goal was to simplify stories. We use data all the time. Besides talking to real human beings, we read financial reports and financial statements and economic publications and statistical publications of the Central Bureau of Statistics and etc. We read thousands of pages filled with numbers, and our goal is to take all those pages and all those numbers and to tell them in a very clear and simple to understand story. Imagine yourselves in the mornings, okay? You get your daily newspaper and you have, let's say, 10 minutes to read it, and in the background the children are yelling and your wife tells you something, and the coffee machine is broken or whatever, and you have all of this noise. You have 10 minutes to read very complicated stories, and we want to help you to be able to do that in those 10 minutes. And one of the ways to do that, in our opinion, is to use infographics, to transform the data into friendly, easy to understand infographics that basically will tell you the whole story in 30 seconds or so. The whole thing looks like this at the beginning, and our goal is to zero on the stuff that interests us and fade away all the noise until we see the number, then magnify it, and then order it, and then give it context, give it meaning. This number says absolutely nothing, but it can be, and it can be, and it also can be this. And this is clearly not the number, because the real number is much higher than that, but this is what we try to do every day. And this challenge is very, very complicated in itself. I wanted to show you some examples of how we do it. And the first one is an old one, actually. And it tells the story of a very big reform that the Prime Minister brought to the Knesset in 2009, I think, and 2010. It's a reform in the planning system, okay? The planning system of housing, etc. The current system, according to the Prime Minister and many other people, is too complicated. The bureaucracy is too heavy, and the planning system just don't keep up with the pace of planning new real estate projects and stuff like that. So the Prime Minister delivered to the Knesset a very big reform that tried to simplify the current planning system. We read the whole thing. Now, I'm talking about tens of pages filled with hundreds of numbers and whatever you want. Very, very complicated. We talked with, we did all of the journalistic work, okay? We talked to sources and tried to understand. We tried to see it from different points of view in order to bring the whole picture to the table, to our readers. But eventually we need to tell the story. And we thought of, okay, how do we translate this very complicated thing into a story easy to understand in those 10 chaotic minutes in the morning? And we let the graphics lead. We told the story to our graphic desk and to the infographic desk, because we have an addition infographic desk at our newspaper, a very big one because we believe in it. And we just told them the story. 10 people that understand absolutely nothing in this field because they know how to do infographics, not, they don't know anything about the planning system. And we asked them, okay, so what do we do now? And they just started sketching. At the end, we had a project of, if I remember correctly, between 6 or 8 pages, which is a very big project for a daily newspaper, that started like this. This was the opening double spread. This double spread demonstrates the structure, or the schematic structure of the current planning system that we have in Israel. And we didn't expect anyone to read it. There's no way you can read this thing on, just by looking at it. You even don't know where to begin, except from the headline, of course. But we wanted to reader do the following thing. We wanted to reader to see this double spread, and then to flip to this double spread, which followed it. And then we wanted him to flip back, and again. And just by flipping, I think that you can see what the reform wants to do. You don't even need to read it. And now, if you have the time and it interests you and you're curious, you can flip back and start reading on our commentary about the reform to understand exactly where the Prime Minister wants to simplify the system, and is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? And of course, you can read about the whole thing more thoroughly in the following pages that I don't show you here. It's just an example of how we use graphics in this case to deliver very complicated data to our readers. And this is an additional example from the same project, just to show you that we really try to make infographics as friendly as we can to our reader without insulting them, by the way. It's a very, very thin point of שיווי משקל. Yeah, it's a very delicate balance of telling people complicated stuff in a simple way without insulting them, without making them feel like as if they're children or something like that. This example is of a different nature. This is from a project that dealt with the question, is the recession already over? The answer is no, but back in 2010 we thought that the answer might be yes. And this is from a project that was, I think, also like 8 pages long, but it tried to tell you a complete story if you read it from the from top down, just to realize the whole thing using very boring, basically, economic data. And you used it not also for news coverage, but also from features. This is a feature that we did on the kibbutzim in Israel, trying to understand which is the richest kibbutz, basically, and how they came so rich. do they do that we don't know how to do? How did they crack the formula, if you want? And you can see the whole thing is based on data. And our goal is to tell this story in a simple way using all this data without frightening our readers. At some point we understood that we can not only tell stories, but we can try to set the agenda as well. And our advantage over the mainstream media is that we know the data. We are familiar with it. We deal with it every day. The mainstream media usually don't deal with these topics. They deal with politics and crime and peace process, if there is a peace process at all. They usually don't deal with the fine print of the economic system that we live in. So we thought we can do that. It began because of the global economic crisis in 2008, but it took us time to realize that something is probably not right with the economic system. And maybe it's time to start questioning it. At the beginning we were very mild, but the challenge stayed the same as with the news coverage. How can you take very complicated data and deliver it in a very simple to understand way? So this is an example of a project we did about how important it is for the Israeli economy and society to encourage the ultra-Orthodox people, the Haredim, to get in the labor force. What you see here is what you can find today in many news sites like Vox.com and the Upshot from the New York Times or the Guardian as well, to tell the story in 4 charts or so. Okay, this is what we try to do here. All of the data is taken from research of a think tank called the Taub Center in Jerusalem, and it's 100 pages long, I think, and we try to take only the crucial information that you need to know about the problem and to present it in a friendly way, to write short text about these charts to surround them, but not to tire the reader. And so he can, after he reads this and maybe contemplates about it during the day, he can take something from it to, to talk to his family on Friday or something. And maybe, by throwing a stone to the pool, it starts to make all of these waves. This is what we try to do here. This is another example, and I think it demonstrates well. For me, this is excellent. Okay, I cannot do something better than this. This story that we did back in 2010 is about the large companies in Israel that during the economic recession cut wages to the workers, but then the economy got better and the companies got back to make some profit, but they just forgot to uncut the wage cuts. So we checked, we read the whole financial statements of approximately 100 companies to check if our thesis is right. And apparently it was. And this was page 1 of the newspaper on the day we published this project that was, you can see at the bottom, it was 6 pages long. And we tried to tell the whole thing in a nutshell in the cover page. So we took all of the cover page, okay, there are no, you have no idea what else is in the newspaper on that same day, and we just told the story. Basically, there's 3 sentences in this page 1, okay? For those who don't know how to read Hebrew, I don't blame you. It says 24 companies cut in 2009 250 million shekels from the wage of 32,000 workers. The main reason was the economic recession. Now guess how much these 24 companies earned last year, which was supposedly a hard year. They earned more than, they made a profit of more than 6 billion shekels. And how much did the workers got back? They got back less than 30 million shekels. 30 million shekels, and what can we learn from it? That, well, that doesn't matter. Which is another way to say, I have no idea how to say it in English. We used very few numbers in those sentences, very few words, basically, in order to tell the whole story based on data that we scraped from the financial statements of 100 public companies. That is something that the mainstream media cannot do. They don't have this set of skills that needed for this kind of work. And I think this is the main this is the importance of the economic media, to bring these stories to the table. And then 2011 came. And in 2011, approximately 400,000 of Israelis went to the streets and pretty much changed everything. And it made us understand that we need to focus more on the topics that build our life here, which means to focus on the health system and on the education system and on the housing problem and on the pension system and etc. We did those things before, but now we understood that the public wants to read about it. Because what we saw in 2011, that on Rothschild Avenue, where was the heart of the demonstrations and process and the whole process of these reshaping society, they had a lot of newspapers there. They had our newspaper and they had our competitors. They were reading it, they were talking about the issues that we put in the paper. It was just a big opportunity, and I remember the day that I understood this. Someone called me and said, you know, on Channel 2, which is Israel's most watched broadcast channel on television, they quoted an article you published like half a year ago. That was in 2011, like in August. And I asked which article, and it was an article that I wrote about the disappearance of the Israeli middle class. And this article was based on economic paper, very complicated one that I admit that I didn't understand fully, of the deputy of the National Security, Social Security, yeah, thank you, Social Security. And he wrote this paper about the disappearance of the middle class, but it was really, you know, like filled with basically stuff that only economics understands. And he wrote it like a year before, and nobody even noticed it because it was so meant to be read just by few people. And we took it and we published it, and we once again told the whole story in 3 charts. This is chart 1 that shows how the Israeli society thank you, in 1997. This is the income classes, okay? You can see there are 4. In 2000 and between 1998 and 2007, we have 3 classes, and in 2008, the middle class just disappears. It simulates whether in the lower class or in the upper class. And this is what we printed half a year before the protest starts, and then it was quoted on Channel 2. And then everybody saw it because nobody read it before, except for that reported on Channel 2, and then I understood it. I understood the difference between the economic media and the mainstream media. And I understood how much can the mainstream media affect the society that we live in if only it's used to cover these kind of topics. And we try today to create stories and to tell stories that we think that the mainstream media would be able to adopt in order to amplify our stories and reach a bigger audience. So in the world of post 2011, we still try basically to do the same thing that we do, just to make it better. And these days, our main challenge or additional challenge is to go digital. It's not a secret that the print industry is basically dying, and I will be unemployed in 5 years. So we try to do the same thing different and to use the advantages of digital storytelling and the advantages of all of the new tools that are being developed every day. And I want to show you some examples. I didn't put in the presentation the stuff that we did with סדנה לידע ציבורי, or whatever you call yourselves in English, the stuff that Adam talked about, because I knew he would talk about. I wanted to show you something else. This is the budget book, the national budget book as you've never read it. The national budget book that is being, that the Ministry of Finance writes every year is a book of just less than 1,000 pages, filled with numbers and tables and whatever, and very few people read it. We want, now this is the most important document that the government manufactures every year, because it sets the priorities of the government. It says where do we, on what do we, yeah, thank you, spend more money on education or on defense or on welfare and etc. And yet nobody reads it, okay? It is our taxpayers' money, and we have absolutely no interest on what they're doing with it. And one of the reasons, in our opinion, is because it is very complicated. It is a too complicated document to read and understand. So we try to simplify it. And we built a digital version of it. We read the whole thing. We thought together what are the most interesting or very most important things that we need to know about this document and the way it affects our lives here. And we rebuilt it into 7 different chapters and deliver it basically as a children's book, just not without the pictures. And we built it as an iPad version, back in the time that we thought there is a future for the iPad version. Today we don't think that. And I want to show you how it works, but I have no idea how to operate. Let's hope, okay, yeah. So this is the budget book, and you can just flip through it as a book. And we try to put very little text in it and do stuff like this. This is, for example, the chapter about the revenues of the government, or in different words, the tax that we pay. And this page, for instance, tried to tell you the whole story in one very easy to understand, in our opinion, chart that shows you that more than half of the tax that we pay is consumption tax, and less than half of what the tax we pay is income tax. To show you how much the government is addicted to VAT, the MAM we pay on everything. What will happen if the government will lower the VAT ratio, for instance? And it goes on. You can now see how it breaks down, and you can learn that for instance, the government is very dependent on drivers to get stuck on traffic, because this way they pay tax three or four times. They pay for the tax on gas, and in the tax on gas there are two kinds of tax. They pay tax on purchasing the vehicle from the beginning with, and they pay a tax for Agrat Rishui, which is license, every year. And the government doesn't want you to use public transportation, because then it won't have so many tax revenues in its to do stuff with it. And it goes on and on and on, and I won't, So, איך אני חוזר? Escape? למה? Right. The next example is a project that we did not long ago about the wage of the CEOs in Israel. We took all of the 600 companies that are being are in the stock market, and we analyzed their financial statements to see how deep are the wage gaps inside each company. So you can see, for example, it's digital, but trust me that if I press here, it opens up to, okay, never mind. It opens up to this thing, and then I can learn about this company and see how the wage gap has developed over the years, and compare companies one to another, and etc. This is a digital project that we published on the Independence Day, that tells us something about the society that we live in. Just so nice that I want you to see it. This uses a tool of Adobe that is called Muse, that enables us to create digital magazine stories, basically. And you can see the whole thing is based on data, okay? On infographics, on stuff that we took out, dug out from the Central Bureau of Statistics reports, and etc. And the challenge is to deliver it in a very friendly way. So these are examples from that. And last, I wanted to show you that the thing that we created here in Shenkar in the data journalism lab. How much did you elaborate about this yesterday? A bit, because she said the opposite. Okay, so this is the project you already know by now. The students created a system that takes all of the Facebook pages of all of the politicians. We had the election not far long ago, and it enables us to analyze which words they're using, so you can see that the Prime Minister talks mainly, or talks a lot about Iran, but it doesn't talk at all about the economy. And you can compare politicians one to another, and to see that this guy started to talk about corruption only when the election campaign began, and not before that. Okay, so what I try to show you here, that we use data all the time, different kinds of it, and the main focus of our work is to simplify it and to deliver it in a very understandable stories to our readers. And now that we enter into the digital era, and I know that we are falling behind after the Guardian, the New York Times, and such, but you know, we're in Israel. Our main challenge now is how to deliver this data not only in very friendly and understandable stories, but also how to deliver it digitally to our readers in a way that they will be able to sort it out in whatever way they want, and to tell the story they want to tell. And it's a very interesting challenge that automatic response to that is, okay, let's just put all of the charts in the website and that's it. But that probably won't work because nobody will sit on those charts. So it's a very difficult challenge, and we're thinking about this, how to do this these days. Really, these days about several projects that we work on them, and if we can do that, and if we can make the mainstream media take the tools that we built in order to tell these stories themselves to a much bigger audience, I think the economic media and data journalism will have a very big effect on the public discourse and on the society that we live in. Thank you very much.
We have some time for questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Shaul. How do you explain why is Israel lagging so far behind in the use of big data and visualization?
I think it's a combination of reasons. One of them would be resources. In order to do data journalism, especially in a digital way, you have to employ developers and designers that know how to create interactive digital systems. Let's put the designers aside. The developers cost a lot of money. I mean, this guy won't be working for us unless we pay him a lot of money that he can earn in other companies. No offense. If you want to work for free, you're welcome. So this is one reason, but it's not the only reason. We are lagging behind the world in so many aspects. And I think it's only natural to us to mature in the next few years after we see if the world, if there's a market for it in the world. I mean, the New York Times and the Guardian do these things and invest huge amounts of money in it, and Vox.com and etc. But we're not still sure if there's revenue for that, if there are enough readers for that to sell ads. Okay, we are in the ads business basically. So I think it's only logical and natural for us to take just a couple more years in order to get there.
Another question? Oh yeah.
Hi. What you can tell us about the audience? Do you have more readers now? Do you have a different dynamic between you and the readers?
Yes. The ones that didn't fall asleep reading my articles are more engaged. And these days you have so many ways of reaching them and for them to reach you using Facebook or Twitter and whatever, to comment about your stuff, to correct what you write, and to explain that you were wrong or didn't see the whole thing because you don't know how to whatever. And it enriches our work, and I think it helps the public to A, be more informed, which is our main job, and B, to be more involved about the topics that we write about.
More comments?
Yeah, you can see you can see it especially on Facebook. In Israel, Twitter is goes slower, so you can see it on Facebook. The data that we print, many activists and such use those. Use these data in order to, encourage people to go out and protest and whatever. What? Okay.
What is your stance about releasing raw data along with your...
I'm in favor.
Do you do it?
Me?
Not you personally, I know you do, but...
I work in a newspaper. Whether to publish the raw data or not is not only my decision. Whenever I'm able to do that, I will do that. That's it. How do I do it?
Why not do it?
sometimes you don't want your competition to get the data. You want to make them sweat a little bit. So it takes time sometimes.
Hi. Are you starting to see a crossover from data journalism, which is focused on economic issues, into more general stories?
Can't think of an example right now, but you can use data in so many fields. I mean, in crime and car accidents. You just need to have this orientation to do that, and a developed set of skills to do that. And if the journalists are only focused on getting the next story or chasing ambulances and whatever, they won't develop the necessary skill set needed to do that. But I think we'll get there. Because the power of using data journalism, if you do it correctly, and Adam talked about it before, if you do it correctly, the data is undeniable. And that is a very strong thing for a journalist to have an undeniable truth. So I think it will happen eventually.
We have time for one more question. Just for the hungry ones in the room, the food would be warm when you come out, even though we're running half an hour late.
Do you happen to know if using those InfoVis, an interactive InfoVis, brings more readers? Does they say more reading?
I have absolutely no idea. The guys that run our sites, of course, detect it, but sometimes the tools that we build it's very technical and boring. We need to use mini sites and whatever. We don't always know what the traffic is. So, yeah.
We have another one up there.
Hi. What is the balance in Calcalist between commercial data and, let's say, authentic data? I mean, for example, a company that want to advertise themselves and want to bring you the data compared to Halamas data, the statistic bureau. I mean, do you look for the story, or where is more the data is sexy?
Yeah. Your question is actually a different question. It's not only about data. It's about journalism. It's do you initiate your own story or stories, or do somebody else give you the story? It doesn't matter if it's a data-driven story or not. I can talk only on my behalf. I don't work with PR people and whatever because of this. I'm very suspicious, and most of the time they just bore me. Sorry. I prefer on talking to people that I know that are in the decision-making process or in important junctions, in order to hear from them which data they think I should be focused about, and then go and read the data and decide, is there a story there? And if so, do I tell it the way that person told me to tell it, or should I tell it from a different angle? And usually the answer is, different angle. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.